Yes, please continue.
Alrighty, so tonight we have Millie from DAZN, head of product there. I did have to check how to say their name, so I'm glad I did before. Looking really forward to this because it's something that I'm super interested in. From ideation to launch, the classic question of what have you done from 0 to 100? So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into this topic. Quickly about me, I am from South Africa. I'm going to be hosting tonight. I'm not going to go through my CV here, but yeah, I've been with Product People now for about a year and a half. And what Product People do, we are interim product managers, interim product ops, and transformation acceleration services. We have an in-house team that do this, and that's how we make money. How we give back, we host free events, both online and in person. Like this one is obviously online. And then, yeah, we have a community of about 50,000 people, which is great. We're going to have a quick question just to get everybody engaged and stuck into the topic. So if you want to scan, if you haven't yet already, if you want to scan the Slido QR code there and answer the question, we can then, yeah, kind of pull the answers and have a quick discussion potentially about that. Or at least Millie can see what the crowd feels about this topic. So I'll let this sit for kind of 10 to 15 seconds, and then we can go from there. Michelle, are we going to get the results here, or do we? You're on mute. Alrighty, so 50-50. So what is the most important step to take before launching a new product? 50% of the people said conducting market research, and 50% said setting a launch date. Interesting. I'm going to maybe leave that, Millie, with you to take on later in your presentation. Yeah, really looking forward to this. I'm going to stop sharing. Millie, you can take over. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. Let me just share my screen. Awesome. Can you see my screen? Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. Yeah, really excited to be a part of the community and hopefully contribute some value as well and walk through some of the things that I feel like are fundamental to actually kind of the ideation stage and think about what we want to build and actually kind of getting it to market and then how we kind of continue to develop and build value on top of that as well. A little introduction to myself. I'm Millie's our head of product at DAZN, often referred to as DAZN. But I like to say to people, just think about getting in the zone. So head of products at DAZN. I've been at DAZN for about 3.5 years now. We're world-leading sports streaming service. So in the UK, if you want to predominantly kind of watch your AJ fights, your Canelo fights, we're the place to be. Across different regions, we've got Bundesliga in Germany and the Liga in Spain, and we have various different offerings across the world and continuously kind of growing really fast. It's been quite exciting to be part of a large company that moves very quickly and does in some ways kind of act as a startup. So it's been a fantastic environment to work in. A little bit more about my kind of background further back. I started my kind of journey into product management with a bit of an entrepreneurial spin, starting an ed tech business out of my university dorm and managing to kind of scale that to 8 different regions and getting 5 million different users across those different regions. And that was my real first experience of kind of product management and building products that really scale and thinking about being really user-centric and what that means for our growth as well. And I'll try and kind of apply some of my experience on the entrepreneurial side and the kind of product leadership side into kind of diving a little bit deeper into thinking about ideation to launch, and what that means when we're building products and what that looks like in terms of success. I'll cover some core topics today, and that would be ideation, validation, development, launch, and then also post-launch, which sometimes I feel like can easily kind of slip underneath the radar. I'll first kind of dive into what I feel is essentially our core role as kind of product managers, whether we're product leaders or individual contributors, and what I feel like our role is when it comes to ideation to putting something to the market. And essentially, I really feel like we are the orchestrators and the anchors of the mission and of the product. And what that means for me is that we have direction on that vision and executing on that vision, kind of keeping stakeholders aligned on that vision and anchoring all of our teams into kind of building those things that kind of align into that. And what does that really look like? For me, it looks like kind of improving and evolving our product and adding value, continuously adding value, being creative, experimenting and taking risks, innovating, and conducting market research and gathering customer feedback continuously, finding new ways to capture and create value, making sure that we're differentiating ourselves from competitors and other products in the market, identifying market opportunities and anticipating industry trends. This one's really important for me. I find it within my day-to-day to not only know about the product that I'm building, but especially in the streaming world, I like to know, what did streaming look like before I kind of joined this market? What does it look like now? What is it going to look like in 10 years' time? So I can kind of always be very aware of what's happening in my market. As mentioned before, being an anchor for all teams, collaborating is so important that we're thinking about who our core stakeholders are, and then maybe the circle just slightly outside of that as well. So are we collaborating with kind of our QA teams, our UX, our marketing teams? Are we our sales teams, our customer service teams? Are we communicating our value to them? And then always continuously learning about ourselves as product people, about our product, about our team, about our stakeholders' needs, and then documenting that as well. I think all of those things are extremely important. And all of these things also really come together when we make sure that as products, as the kind of product leads, that we really understand the why when we do anything, and that why can really drive the mission that we're trying to achieve, and that really helps us shape what we want to build and kind of what we put to market and how we put it to market as well. So for me, a real key thing is understanding our why, and that really helps us define any problem statements that we may have, and that for me is imperative when thinking about even stepping into that ideation stage. And an example at DAZN, like I said, where our company vision is to be the largest sports streaming service across the world. And we want customers to enjoy our platform. We want them to kind of get on and seamlessly enjoy live sports and everything they need. So that for me is always the why. When I'm thinking about what we're building, the why is because we want to be the largest sports streaming service in the world. And then start thinking about, what does that look like? Start thinking about, what does that look like in regards to retention? How are we keeping customers on our platform? Are we providing them with the content that they want? How are we acquiring customers? If we want to be the world's largest sports streaming service, we need to be acquiring customers at scale. And that also means kind of launching into new regions as well. So always keeping that why in the back of our mind when thinking about kind of what we're building and what potentially our problem statements are. So now I feel like you kind of understand maybe your problem statement, or you have your why from the business, and we know what we're trying to achieve in the long term. I think this is when we can start moving into that ideation stage. For me, I typically find this the most fun stage of everything. And this is really starting at the top of the funnel. As an entrepreneur, when I was building my business, we were constantly challenged to think about the long term. What does 5, 10, 15, even 20 years time, what does that look like for us? So I was constantly put in a state of having to really practice blue sky thinking. And I find that now within kind of product management, I don't get to do that as much on a day-to-day. So I make it my purpose to pull myself out of my day-to-day and really practice some blue sky thinking, because there are some real benefits to taking myself out the day-to-day, thinking more long-term, thinking a lot higher about what it is that we want our customers to feel, what it is that we want to achieve in 5 years' time. what it is how we really want to innovate. And thinking forward like this does really help us innovate, does really help us become risk adverse, does really help us stay a little bit ahead of the market as well. Some of the ways that I like to practice blue sky thinking, and I like to practice ideation as well, is actually being a user. I find it really important to not only use the products that I'm working on and that I'm building, but to use other products that I know my users are also using. And again, this helps me really identify some of the pain points that our customers are having, some of the expectations that they should be having when they're using a product. An example, like I said, for DAZN, a big portion of our audience are users that are really interested in influencers such as KSI and Jake Paul. So I try to use other products that those influencers are on and those users are on, like Twitch. I'm not necessarily interested in Twitch as a product, but it really helps me get into the mindset of what my customers are expecting from a product. And that helps me really identify pain points and think about things that they may be interested from a product. And one of those things that I figured quite recently is that those types of users really like to be able to interact with the influencers. So let's think about how we can incorporate that on our platform and figure out ways that we can allow our users to connect with the influencers that we have on our platform a little bit more. And that's really about kind of diversifying my learning and making sure I'm kind of not just thinking about the product that I'm building, but thinking about how our users should be using those products. Another way I like to go around kind of ideation and blue sky thinking is running workshops. For me, I appreciate that maybe not everybody's comfortable running workshops. So take the initiative to kind of approach your product leaders, ask them to run workshops to support with that ideation process. What I like to do in these workshops is I like to kind of bring everybody together and say, let's map out our product and then take a magic wand and kind of say, what would we want to build if there were no limitations? There were no limitations on time, resources, or anything like that. What would we want to build? And that really starts us thinking right at the top. This is really what I envision the product kind of looking and how I want it to feel. And then you can kind of work backwards from there. Another really simple way to kind of get into that ideation mind frame is actually just taking time away from your desk and speaking to not only yourselves, but some of the other people that are around you as well. I honestly like to take the time away and I like to go and sit or chat with the customer service team. They hear it at all ends from our customers, what they love, what they hate, what they're frustrated with. And I like to just take time away from my desk, have a conversation with some of my colleagues in the customer service team. And I always get some fantastic ideas after speaking to them. Similarly, marketing teams as well. They're very close to our users, very close to our customers. So I like to take time away, just sit with them. And these things really kind of get my brain ticking and start thinking about how I can really deliver value for our customers, or deliver value for my team, deliver value for the business, whilst always kind of keeping that core, why are we doing this, at the back of my mind as well. Now we kind of have a few ideas and we've done the ideation stage. I like to kind of narrow some of those things down and start validating some of those ideas. And a great way to validate is via market research. Not only does it kind of help you get a little bit closer to your customers, get some answers to your ideas that you may not be able to get internally, but it also helps with risk mitigation as well, which is such a huge thing. Building a product that nobody wants and entering a saturated market is something that wastes a lot of time, or waste a lot of effort, and sometimes waste a lot of morale. So let's try and validate some of those things before we kind of get too heavy in the development and the launching side of things. Some fantastic ways to do this is via market research. I think before I start doing any form of kind of market research, I like to have a little plan kind of documented and make sure everybody who's involved is really aligned. So what's the strategic plan for the market research? What are we trying to get out of our users? What are the answers? What are the questions that we're trying to have answered? And what are the risks that we're really trying to avoid, particularly if you're launching something completely new? An example of some market research and a pain point that I've had in the past is working on Revision app. And the sign up journey we had a lot of kind of drop off during the sign up journey. So we really thought, we've got a couple of features that we want to build. We want to validate them. So we was like, we need to start conducting some market research, get a bit of feedback. And And then from that market research, we very quickly realized that actually the people that we were speaking to were the completely wrong users. We assumed that we were speaking to students, and we wanted to know why their sign-up experience was so bad and why they were dropping off. And via market research, we very quickly learned that actually it wasn't the students we should have been speaking to. It was the person that was holding the payment method, which was normally a parent or a carer, or in some cases even a teacher. So doing market research, we really got that key information, and we were able to kind of now build our sign-up journey and change the messaging, change what we were communicating to a slightly different audience, and we saw our conversion change. Yeah, I want to kind of dive into like some of the key things I really think about when we're doing market research. Some of the ways I like to do this is conducting surveys. These are surveys that you can embed into the product. If you have an existing product, that means that you probably have access to tons of users that you can probably get really instant, quick feedback from by just embedding surveys in the products, or even sending surveys out. It's quite low touch, quite easy to turn around, something quite quick to do. Leverage the customers that you already have. Reach out to some of your customers via social media or however it may be, and ask them if they're willing to have a chat or an interview, and offer them, whether it's a subscription-based business, whether they get a free month of your subscription, or anything you can kind of incentivize users to want to actually come down and have a chat with you. And some really core passionate users will just do this, and they'll happily do this for free as well. I think focus groups is a great way to do it. It's a fantastic way to get people in the room, get them visibly kind of using the products in front of you, and lots of people kind of bounce off each other and a bit more open in a group setting. Competitor analysis is another form of market research that I feel sometimes gets forgotten about. I mentioned earlier kind of using other products, and when I'm doing that, I'm thinking, I love this feature that they've got. That was really easy to use. Or like shaking my head at something, I feel like this is terrible and we should stay away from doing this particular thing, and really pinpointing the strengths and weaknesses that other products have as well, and thinking about how you could potentially adapt them to your own product. They're fantastic ways to kind of leverage products that are already out there that you know people are using, and thinking about adopting them for yourself. And these are really good ways to kind of getting a bit of feasibility without actually launching anything to the market. Another way to kind of get a bit more kind of user feedback and doing a bit of market research is to do some prototyping and building some form of MVP. For me, this really could be wireframes. It could be mock-ups. It doesn't actually have to be a product that you're building. I've drawn things on a piece of paper and then kind of taken it out to customers and asked them, what do you think about this? Does this flow make sense? Like when I was kind of in the startup days, and those things, really low touch, really quick turnaround, again, fantastic for getting feedback. Even kind of whipping some things up and working with the UX team and getting things on a PowerPoint presentation and in front of users to say, which page makes more sense to you? Which one is easier to digest? Really quick ways to get feedback from customers. And it really helps you kind of test some of the assumptions that you may have and some of the hypotheses that you may be gathering as well. I think sometimes, especially for me, I always thought market research was quite intimidating and it took time and effort and organizing things. But there are things you can do today that you can kind of take away, really low touch, and get some really quick feedback, particularly if you are working on an existing product. And that's something that I try to do continuously, even if it's not a new feature, if it's an existing one, go and get that validation and market feedback. Now you kind of have an idea of like why you're building something and what you're building it from. That market research, is time to kind of get into crafting that roadmap, and even more importantly, kind of aligning with your stakeholders, and kind of painting your vision for what you really want to achieve. And this is really imperative to kind of get your story right, so that you can kind of get all the teams on board, sell them on your vision, and most importantly, get buy-in so that you can get the resources and support you need to achieve your goal. And a lot of that, again, I can't reiterate this enough, is kind of going back to that why. Why is this your roadmap? Why are these items on your roadmap? What have you validated already? What do you feel like you can achieve and from launch to kind of what it might look like in 3 months' time, and really getting buy-in from your core stakeholders. And that buy-in looks very different from the technical teams to marketing teams to engineers to UX to your manager, making sure you understand their motivations, and kind of crafting your story to get buy-in depending on what their motivations might be. And that's super important. And this is when we really should start thinking about how you should expect people to use these features or the product that you're building, the types of engagement that you may expect to be getting, such as what are the clicks going to look like on this new kind of call to action? How many people do we predict to be buying these things based off of some of the research you've done, and or how many people are going to be viewing this piece of content kind of based on some of the research that you've done or existing features that you might be iterating on, and some of the positive impact that your roadmap will have. Being able to communicate that will really help with kind of getting into that development and execution stage. And then you start thinking about the more practical side of things and the more practical side of development and execution. And that possibly looks like working really closely with engineers. And this looks very different in different organizations. And where I am at DAZN at the moment, I absolutely love working with our engineers because they are very much involved in the discussion. It's not just, this is what we're building, let me pass it on. They are very much involved in discussions on how we build things, and do we build things in a scalable way, and what does this look like 5 features down the line. And I find this encouraging. Kind of working together with engineers is always, there's so many benefits to that as well. And then there's the kind of basics, making sure you're really strong on the stories that you're creating, kind of managing that backlog and prioritizing how things should be built. Same when it comes to working with designers and the user experience teams, I like to loop them in very early on. They have very kind of different mindset and very different input than I have, and they ask different questions and they make me think about different things, and I have a vision of what I want things to look like. So I kind of really strongly rely on our kind of designers and UX experience to make sure that vision is being communicated back to our customers and also back to the business. So again, just really going back to making sure you can communicate what you're trying to develop as well. And then it's, once we're kind of in that phase and our teams are doing what they need to do and they're building everything and then it's all starting to come together, then we can start thinking about what does our comms with our stakeholders look like. We've got the buy-in, and we need to continuously kind of communicate to them and make sure that we've got really good feedback loops to ensure that along the way we've got alignment. A lot of mistakes I've made in the past is kind of communicating at the beginning of development and then kind of launching and then having stakeholders come back and be like, this doesn't make sense. This should have gone to market. So I find it really important that throughout that development stage, I'm performing demos and I'm showing the product to our stakeholders and getting their feedback and making sure that they're looped in along the way, making sure that I'm aware if has anything changed in the market, particularly in the boxing world. Components, they change all the time. There's things that are moving around. A new competition might have been launched or something like that. So it's very important that I'm continuously kind of looping in my stakeholders during the development and execution stage as well. And that really just builds trust and confidence that you're delivering something. It also means that if a risk does come up and something is delayed, there are no shocks and surprises. Again, lots of mistakes I've made in the past is communicating a risk or a delay too late. It takes a long time to build trust with stakeholders, but it's very easy to lose it quite quickly. So continuously communicating and making sure that their stakeholders are aware of what's going on during the development stage is so important. And working really closely with teams during this development stage, not just kind of handing off to delivery or engineers as well, making sure I'm very involved with the QA process and I'm supporting as much as I can as well, and being really accountable. And this is something that I like to stress to my team a lot, being really accountable for the end-to-end experience. What does it look like the moment somebody interacts with our brand to the very end, and then being completely accountable for that. Even in different areas, am I speaking to the app support team so that I know what customer service looks like if something does go wrong with the feature? Just being very accountable for every end-to-end piece, not just the actual product itself. And then we've got the kind of launch phase and beyond. This can be a very stressful period, but there's so many things that kind of go into this part. And it's really sometimes having a go-to-market strategy. For us, we have hundreds and thousands of users on our platform, so it's very important that I have a very clear go-to-market strategy. Some of those things may vary from having a soft launch to a full launch. Are we going to launch it to just a small percentage of customers or just to one region, just to get a little bit of feedback, monitor things, make sure nothing goes wrong? And this is where I get support from our QA team or our monitoring team, and I ask for advice. What do they think is best? Do we want to launch with an A/B test? Do I want to launch just to half of our users, get some feedback, I've done this before. I've launched a feature where I thought it was going to do fantastically well and we were going to convert loads of users. We launched it, had to roll back very quickly because it actually impacted our acquisitions. And that was a lesson learned. We probably should have done it as an A/B test or as a soft launch. Marketing and sales teams and customer service, making sure they're all aligned on everything. And you've got marketing materials that are going to go out internally and externally as well, and making sure that everybody internally is aware of this new feature launch. I think this is internally updating all stakeholders is a fantastic way to really demonstrate your hard work and the value that you're doing as well. I feel like sometimes we find it hard to kind of shout about the work that we're doing. We just want to kind of get on to the next thing. But when it comes to your own career development and thinking about next steps and people seeing the value in what you're delivering, it's so important to also not just think about launch comms externally, but also launch comms internally as well. And then following up on those launch comms with some data as well to say, this is how it's performing, this is some changes that we've made, and this is what we expect as well. Yeah, and I kind of touched on a little bit around making sure that we've got the monitoring is in place. We've got some form of way of gathering feedback from customers, and we can address any issues really quickly. And then we have our kind of post-launch phase as well. And this is when we can start thinking about iterating on some of those things that maybe we had to deprioritize because we couldn't get them out in time for launch. And we had to kind of scale back, thinking about how we're going to scale this feature to other regions and what it might look like in other regions as well. So also once things have launched and you've kind of got that launch plan, is also having a bit of a post-launch plan as well. And that monitoring and feedback and iteration are absolutely vital, and they're key for success. As we're coming towards the end, I've kind of touched on what it looks like for ideation and validation, development and kind of launch plan. I want to touch on some of the challenges and some of the solutions to those challenges that I've faced personally throughout my career, whether it's kind of working on launching a product from scratch or launching an individual feature. It can be really easy to navigate away from the reason why we are doing something, especially when you're getting contributions from other stakeholders as well, and you're kind of being pushed and pulled in other directions, and everybody wants this, but it's always going back and asking, why are we doing something? And I'll dive a little bit deeper into this a little bit later. I always get questions around how do you manage stakeholders that push things on your roadmap. I'll dive into that in a moment. Having constant feedback loops with users and stakeholders and partners, and kind of, again, using your expertise and your instincts as product people, coupled with things like data, that's our superpower. Like making sure that we have those strong feedback loops and we're continuously learning, but also letting your instincts kind of guide you when it comes to like iterating and moving forward. Strategically being able to pivot as well. I think sometimes I've seen where we can kind of get really protective over the things that we've put on our roadmap and what we want to deliver. But it's also such a strength to be able to kind of pivot and understand when something maybe isn't working or we need to change our direction slightly, and being able to then communicate that as well, and being adaptable and agile as well, I think is quite important. And sometimes, again, like mistakes I've made, being really headstrong that this is the right thing and not listening and kind of taking on board other people's feedback as well. So it's really important to be able to strategically pivot, not just pivot, but make educated assumptions on the way we should pivot. And then ask for feedback as well. I think a lot of the challenges that you face during this kind of ideation to launch process, I always like to go back and ask for feedback on how I performed as the product lead on this, or as someone as part of the team as well, and how I can improve next time. I find it really useful to kind of go and get some 360 reviews from everybody, speak to colleagues, do retrospectives, and that really helps me kind of avoid a lot of these challenges that I may have faced this time around. And another thing that kind of really helps kind of hone in on that, us being the orchestrators and the anchors and kind of trying to avoid any mistakes, for me is the who and the 5 whys. I find this so important, and I try to apply this to any initiative that I'm working on, or anything that I try to do. I also use this to hold myself accountable, to quickly validate things, and to also hold some of my stakeholders accountable when they're asking for things to be put on the roadmap. They're coming to me with solutions instead of problems, and I like to understand why something is kind of being landed on my desk. So first of all, I like to kind of clearly state what the issue is that a customer is facing. An example would be our user engagement has dropped significantly and we're losing users within the first 3 days. Sometimes, again, I get stakeholders coming to me with solutions, but I like to ask the 5 whys, ask myself and ask them these 5 whys before we start to solutionize. The first one is kind of asking why this problem is occurring. Why are our users dropping off after 3 days? And the answer typically could be something like they're not viewing our content, so they're dropping off quickly. The second level of the why is kind of digging deeper, asking why the first is happening. Why are our users dropping off and not viewing? An answer for this could be because our users are not finding the content that they want. The third layer would be a question such as, why are users not finding the content interesting? An answer could be because the content recommendations are just not relevant for them. The fourth layer could be a question such as, why is our content recommendations not relevant? An answer being something like, because our recommendation algorithm is outdated or doesn't exist at all. And then we can really start to think, we know what the problem statement is. We're getting closer to why we have this problem. And then the last final question is really digging deeper into the root of that. Why is this recommendation algorithm outdated? And for us, it was because we wasn't collecting relevant information to really understand our users to build a recommendation algorithm. And again, these 5 whys, I sometimes have to remind myself of these throughout the flow. So when I've got things on my roadmap, I do go back and say to myself, why are we building this? Why is it not working? Why are customers having these problems? And it keeps my head on track, and also keeps our stakeholders on track when they do come to me with solutions. This technique keeps things simple. It's really easy to implement. You can kind of do it across 5-10 minutes. It doesn't require any data or statistical analysis. It's really effective. It really helps you identify the root cause of something and dig really deep into things and not jump to a solution. It keeps the focus. It keeps the focus on the underlying cause rather than getting sidetracked by like multiple issues as well, and really helps you kind of, again, just stay anchored to that mission of what we're trying to achieve. Just to recap on some of the things that I've covered earlier, thinking about ideation to market and how to kind of achieve success. It's really important to understand why we're creating anything and really make an effort to kind of dive yourself into that blue sky thinking ideation process and take time away from that meeting prep or that presentation that you need to do, and take a step back and think about, what do you really want? Even if it's just one feature, what do you want this feature to be? How do you want people to feel when they're using it? And really start on a high level and kind of work backwards. 2, I'd say, be the anchor for your team, be the vision, and be that core kind of communicator and keeping everybody in line, making sure that nobody has to kind of second guess what you're thinking or what your next move is, and over communicate sometimes to build that trust. And then thirdly, I'd say learn and iterate, and just lead. This applies not only to kind of the product process, but the role of kind of a PM and improving ourselves as well. I always try to learn from a process, but also kind of try to learn as an individual as well, and how I can make sure that I'm evolving as a product person and a product leader. And for me, the core thing is be proactive and be impactful as possible. Make sure that we're working on the right things and we're really driving value, and you're communicating that value as well, so everyone can be on the same page as you as well. Lastly, just want to say thank you for taking the time to kind of listen. I hope I've touched on lots of core points, and hope you've provided some value for you as well, and some things that you can actually take away today and kind of start implementing tomorrow as well, and things for the long term as well. But yeah, happy to answer any questions or connect with anybody as well. I'll hand back over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Millie. Yeah, that was great. Honestly, from my side, I have a few questions which I might be pinging you afterwards if we don't get to them. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Really interesting company as well. if you don't mind, stop sharing, and then I can take over that. All right. So we've got Q&A now that you can ask Millie about the presentation and everything, all the challenges she's facing, and she can maybe have some advice for you. You can ask this on all streaming platforms, so whatever you're watching on, just pop that in the comments, and Michelle will go and grab those, and we can then ask them here. Or you can scan Slido and ask them through Slido as well. So either way, you can do that. We are just going to go into what product people do in the meantime, so that we can kind of buy a little bit of time there as well. So on our side, what we do and when to engage us. I mentioned what we do, but when to engage us, like really on the product management side or product coaching / product ops side, as well as product discovery. On the product management side, our sweet spot is covering permanent position covers. So maybe someone has left, or you need to hire someone, and you don't want to hire someone immediately. You need to buy a little bit of time. We come in, we'll cover the role for however long it takes. It does take a while sometimes, 3 to 9 months or longer, to find the right person. On parental covers, Europe has generous parental covers, so often people being out for a while, we can cover those roles, or anything urgent, like discovery, as you'll see in the last point, delivery, building MVPs, and things like that. On the second point, product coaching and product consulting, we do that as well as product ops and program management. So yeah, that might be just polishing up your skills and having someone to talk to about your product management career. We can do that, as well as streamlining processes in some like bigger companies that are scaling or are kind of like merging a whole bunch of companies together. And we can come in and assist on the product ops side there, or the program management side there, as well as product discovery, which I mentioned. I don't need to go into that again because I see we're getting some questions in. Some of the companies we've worked with, Zalando, Tier, Freenow, Douglas, Ecosia, some really big companies, back market around Europe. So yeah, some awesome companies there on the B2C side. On the B2B side, Remote, World Health Organization, Havi, Utopia, some of the big B2B companies out there, which is awesome as well. And then our side, we've worked with 300 cross-functional teams. Like it says, there's 70 plus clients across Series A all the way through to publicly listed companies. We have 42 product leaders and product managers. They're all in-house, full-time. So the quality is managed by product people themselves. There's an incredible supervisor set up within the company. So there's a lot of support internally to do the job. So the quality is maintained. And then we have 62% of our leadership team is women. Let me get into the hiring side of things. We've got another section here for questions. On the hiring side, we are hiring right now. It is actually, hang on. Let's come back to this. Let's go to the questions first. Okay, so Millie, I'm sure you can see these questions as well. But I think, let's go with question one. How do you involve all the stakeholders in the product design process? And which teams are most important for the design approval?
Yeah, sure. I guess just starting off, I wouldn't necessarily always involve all stakeholders in the kind of product design process. It's being selective about the ones that you feel like can really provide value at that early stage as well. I'm trying to think of an example of the stakeholders that I would involve. I do actually like to involve kind of whoever's leading on the engineering side of things as well, as that they're the team that's going to be implementing it, and they can kind of give really critical early feedback. At different stages, I would involve different stakeholders. So quite early on, again, like research teams, engineering teams, they're the people that I'd involve very early on. And then when we kind of get further down the line, again, if I'm solving a customer issue within the platform, maybe I'd involve customer service before we kind of get to the development stage of things, marketing teams. It really depends on what I'm kind of building, and depends on which stage I introduce different stakeholders. Some stakeholders will kind of be introduced to the design more so at the end, kind of at the demo stages, where they can give feedback on maybe perhaps some of the copy and making sure it's really specific to a particular region, or giving a bit more kind of feedback on the layout or the imagery. And that's maybe when I'd involve more of the marketing team. So it really depends on different stages. But if I'm at the ideation stage, and we're starting to think about the first level of design, I always love, again, to introduce engineers and be very clear with them that this isn't a final design. This is very early stages. We want to get your feedback. And then also, yeah, I think they're fantastic to kind of loop in really early on. Yeah, different stages depending on the different stakeholders. I'm happy to kind of answer a question around specific stakeholders that should be looped in, but there's also a really fine balance between looping people in at the right time and not looping too many people in too early on and having kind of too many chefs in the kitchen, and getting to validate things before you kind of get it in front of certain people as well. So it's a mix between kind of sharing and getting feedback, sharing and getting approval. So I would need to get kind of approval from whether it's kind of the CTO and the tech side of things or the CPO, and then actually kind of demoing as well, which is slightly later on in the stage. Everyone is aware of the new design and they can give smaller bits of feedback as well. So yeah, those three things, thinking about collaborative design feedback, approval design feedback, and then also kind of demo design feedback as well. Three different things which require three different types of feedback.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, involving too many stakeholders means too many opinions, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely.
In the early stages. So yeah, I think this is, I guess, another one about stakeholders and quite similar, but talks about the stages here. So like among the different stages that you mentioned from your own experience, which one do you consider most optimal to involve the stakeholders?
Most optimal. Again, depending on the stakeholder, I guess the first iteration of the design, I like to be quite confident that I've got something that's maybe 70% there, and then get it in front of people. I don't want to spend too much time working on a bit of design and a bit of UX and not getting it in front of some of my stakeholders to get feedback. I think I've made the mistake of kind of looping people in too early and then again having too many different conflicting opinions and nothing kind of being cohesive. So I like to kind of have my vision, work really closely with the UX team, to kind of communicate that vision and get them to kind of mock it up. Maybe we've got 3 different examples, and then when I'm kind of 70% done with that, then loop in stakeholders, and get some critical feedback so I can quickly pivot and change anything before we start any development work. I also do like to get some of those mock-ups done and essentially get it in front of users, get that feedback done first, and then kind of make the changes and then get it in front of stakeholders as well. But again, it really depends on the stakeholders. I kind of realized throughout my experience that some stakeholders understand very clearly the definition of like a mock-up, and this is something we're thinking about and it's a concept, and some stakeholders need to see something that's almost complete and almost done. So it's really important to understand the expectations of your stakeholders as well. Your manager is probably a good sounding board to be like, this is the concept, this is what we're thinking about, can I have some feedback? But maybe some more of the other senior stakeholders, they want to see something more of a finished product, and that's maybe slightly further down the line. So it's being really clear on the motivations and what the stakeholders need from you. Do they want to see something really early on, or do they actually just want to see something slightly further down? And there's also no harm in asking them as well what their expectations are of you on the product and design side of things.
Yeah, I think that leads quite nicely into like the meetings and methods kind of ceremonies around, like, do you have any like standard ones that you use like throughout the process to update stakeholders about the initiatives?
Yeah, certainly. So there will be like the day-to-day ones that I may have with the core team. I do kind of like a day-to-day check-in with, especially when we're getting closer to like delivery side of things, or like we're really in the ideation stage, and the audience may change, but early ideation stage, I like to have maybe every other day I'm catching up with kind of the UX team, the researcher team, the core team that are involved in kind of mapping out what it's going to look like, how it's going to work, how it's going to function. And then when we kind of get closest to the delivery time, I like to have my daily sessions with the QA team, the engineering team. And when we get even closer, then I'll have a session with customer service and those types of things as well. And then on the flip side, we've got the bigger stakeholders that don't want that much detail. I may send them just an email, bullet pointed summary of this is the status, this is what's next, and being really clear and concise, something they can read in 30 seconds. And then maybe send that, I guess, after every kind of core milestone. Again, that will look very different for you. Some of my stakeholders, especially when we're getting close to launch, they want to know every other day what the status is, how we're looking, what's significantly changed. They don't want a status update if nothing has changed. But I think they also may worry if things go quiet for a little bit. So I think thinking about a good cadence for different types of stakeholders, maybe the ones that are less involved in the day-to-day probably need less of an update, less frequent, with more high-level detail. But stakeholders that are involved in the day-to-day, they will need a lot more detail. They want you to kind of steer the direction of things as well. So maybe having that kind of daily cadence and stand up with them is really useful. And then I like to have a central document where I update the status of things. And then if anybody wants to know that isn't that close to my day-to-day stakeholders, I can just share it with them. So I'm continuously updating, whether it's kind of Confluence or Notion, to be like, this is the status today. This is what still needs to be done. If anybody asks, I don't have to answer the same questions over and over again. I can just shoot them this document and they've got an updated version of where we are and when we plan to launch and what it's currently looking like.
That's smart.
I think that was a lot of time in the past is having I get the same questions from 10 different stakeholders. I'm like, just refer to the document. This is where we are at the moment.
So this is what looks like the last stakeholder question. It's been stakeholder heavy here. How did you handle a situation where your product ideas were challenged by other teams or stakeholders?
Yeah, sure. So this one will always kind of happens at different levels and different stages. I think I always need to be very confident, again, on the why I'm choosing to do something. This is why I've picked this particular initiative, because I think it's going to have X, Y, and Z impact. This is when kind of I didn't necessarily touch on it, but going through that roadmap and think about what we're going to be building, I like to do, whether it's kind of walking through like a RICE framework. So for each initiative, I'm thinking about what's the reach this initiative is going to have, how many customers are we going to reach, what's the impact it's going to have, is it going to impact our finances, is it going to impact how quickly someone can access something, what's the confidence I have in it, and then what's the effort it's going to take. If I can answer those 4 questions when somebody pushes back, I can normally kind of give them a bit of confidence and trust in what I'm building makes sense. So it's always being able to back up what I'm saying with a little bit of validation and a little bit of confidence that I am delivering something because it aligns with the company's overall business goal. So being able to really strongly answer why you're doing something, and having something to validate and back up what you're saying as well, whether it is data, whether it is customer feedback, whether it is a bit of market research. So it's a combination between your vision as the product person looking after this, and then also some like quantitative or qualitative data to back it up. And also sometimes being open and receptive to that pushback and that feedback, because they're coming from a different perspective from you, and they may be able to kind of provide another bit of insight that you may have missed or you didn't necessarily think about. So I think it's finding a balance between being able to really strongly put my case forward and back it with data and evidence and the why, but also being willing to kind of compromise and work together with teams and take on a bit of feedback as well. And there will be those instances sometimes where we have to deliver things that we don't always feel like is the right thing to deliver. And that comes with kind of building those relationships and working with maybe external partners on B2C things. But for me, when I then do that, I always am very tight on tracking how well that has gone. So then if we have this kind of discussion next time, I can kind of go back and say, look, this is what we achieved this time. I think we should take a different approach.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. So this is the last, we're running out of time, I guess. So this is the last question we're just going to ask you. So like, how do you balance creativity and market demands when generating ideas? Are there specific frameworks or techniques you use to prioritize which ideas to pursue?
Yeah, sure. So I think I just touched on one, like RICE. I love using that one. I think it's really simple. It's really easy to work out. I have an Excel spreadsheet that I've created with like a formula in it, which I'm happy to send to anyone as well, which helps me calculate a RICE formula really well. But yeah, when it comes to prioritizing those things, it's which ones, I think there's another element that I love to add to it as well. So we've got, yes, things might have a really big reach and a big impact, and I might be confident in it, and it might be kind of low impact or low effort. But there's also three things I like to think about. And one of them is being, does it have a wow factor? Is it going to wow our customers? Sometimes those things, they're fantastic. They might not have a massive reach, but they're really wow factors. I'm trying to think of an example. On our DAZN platform, when a customer makes an additional purchase, we've got something that kind of pops up, and like it's like a confetti that pops up. It's not necessarily a needed feature. It doesn't fix anything, but it's a wow feature. It gives you a sense of dopamine when you've made a purchase, and yeah. And then we've got our enablers, like adding a score to something. Does it enable other features as well? This new feature that we're launching may be really small, but does this piece of tech or does this new feature, will it open other things in the future as well? So using that to think about prioritizing things as well. It may have a low reach now, but in the future, it may have a bigger reach as well. And then also thinking about like pain points as well. What are the smaller things that we can do today that are really quick wins that can help us fix things that aren't wow features, that aren't going to have a big reach, but are fixing smaller problems and smaller frustrations every day. So yeah, thinking about that kind of RICE framework, I love that. I'll lean into that as much as I can. And then those three things around, is it a wow factor? Is it killing a pain point? And is it an enabler? And kind of scoring off of those things. And then how do I kind of balance creativity and market demands? This is a really big thing for me at DAZN. I kind of look after our UK, US, and our emerging markets in Canada, and we get loads of requests kind of coming in from them, and they're all very different. How do I balance the creativity of that? Getting them involved in that creative process sometimes, and having their involvement and input, and making it seem like it's not just me kind of pushing my ideas and pushing what I think is best, but getting them involved with that process as well, making sure that they feel heard, they feel valued, they feel like they have some involvement as well. There'll be some stakeholders that may not want to be involved, so it's sometimes just asking them, what's your preference, this or this, on something slightly smaller, and some may want to be involved quite heavily. So sometimes for me it means running a little workshop, even if it's just with 3 people, and getting them involved in that early ideation stage as well. I think getting them involved and not just telling them what we're going to build, I think sometimes really helps balance out that market demand versus wanting to be creative. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think that felt like it answered the question for me. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to firstly just say thank you. Honestly, it's been great. I've learned a hell of a lot, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's been awesome. I've got a few questions that I probably will send to you. But I think, it's been awesome. Thank you. So wrapping up on this side, we are hiring. I can tell you the hiring process is honestly great. There's a lot of feedback that comes from Pro People. It's the only company I've ever interviewed at that gave me feedback right from the beginning. It was really an awesome time to interview, a cool company to interview with. And then we have a newsletter as well. Please subscribe. We put a lot of effort into it, and there's actually a lot of really cool content that comes out of that newsletter. So please subscribe. On next week, we have our very own Elena presenting efficient operations, balancing tech and human centricity. That's next week, Tuesday. So feel free to sign up or just be here at the same time you were here today. Thank you very, very much. And thank you again, Millie. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm also happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn as well, and reach out and answer any questions.
Melissa, we'd like you to stay just for a quick feedback, and I'll just go